Prashant, just take a look at ITC. I think now some of the fine print starts to come out.
Yeah.
And actually excise has been hiked on cigarettes and fairly sharply. So now ITC from being up is now down.
Yeah, down significantly as well. Although, if is it going to impact volume growth for ITC cigarettes, it hasn't in the past, even though a stick of, say for example, classic miles costs 10 rupees or something. I don't think cigarette volume growth per se has been impacted, but I think the stock goes down. Traditionally, excise is high, stock goes down, and then is bought into by the end of the day. Let's get Nilesh's thoughts on this. Nilesh, ITC, I mean, if there's one thing which people are pretty sure something will happen in the budget is excise on cigarettes. It's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually one of those high probability events. You know that there's going to be a hike. The hike happens. Despite that, the stock comes down. And then, of course, it gets digested. I think what it does structurally for the company is that it robs the company of some kind of pricing power. So I think clearly, I mean, obviously, increasing excise duty has its own merits, but obviously as a company, it takes away some of the pricing power which they have.
But is there a broader issue, Nilesh, as well? It's not just the excise, but the broader thinking about tobacco consumption, curbing it. You know, you can display cigarette ads, for example. There were a lot of things, right? Smoking age limit, and many such things were done. So it kind of, the thrust seems to be very clear which way it is going. In terms of, loose cigarettes. 70% of all cigarettes sold are loose in India. So curbing that, there were recommendations of a panel about that. I don't know if that's anything that's been done on that. Won't be part of the budget, but it's about the thinking, the philosophy on this.
Yeah, absolutely, Prashant. I think one is, of course, to look at it as some kind of a fundraising exercise, or how do you shore up your tax revenues, and obviously that's the low-hanging fruit. But you're right. I think a lot of other policy initiatives which you basically undertake to curb consumption, I think obviously ought to be taken. Another equally important thing is that I wish the budget would have mentioned that the government is basically selling off its stake in ITC. I mean, ideally, why would the government want to own a cigarette manufacturing company? So I think obviously that could have been an extremely good measure, which could have also announced, apart from, of course, the hike in excise duty.
Right, Atul Punj, before you leave us, so on a broader level, meets expectations, which were already very high, slightly disappointed. How would you rate it?
I'd give it a 9 on 10. I think we're pretty much moving the distance, and I think this government is committed to delivering in terms of ease of business. So hopefully this is really a first step. I'm fairly confident that the people in authority today are really obsessed with actually delivering on the ground. So if that happens, I think we've got a winner.
9 on 10, if that's high, actually I should get everyone. Finance ministers hate it when we get ratings, but let me ask all of you. Nilesh, what sort of rating would you be giving it?
Well, I'd give it honestly 10 on 10, because I clearly think this is a budget about ease of doing business. Right from where you start doing a business, where everything is on a pre-approved basis, you can kickstart a business. This budget refers to basically setting up mechanisms to resolve disputes. It talks about simplifying the bankruptcy process and having appropriate legislation for that. Corporate tax rate has been reduced. A lot of clarifications have come out in terms of MAT, in terms of FI investments. I think there's a clear-cut roadmap to move towards GST. The fact that service tax has been hiked is clearly an indication that GST is on the anvil next year for sure. So I think on the whole, I think it has a lot of initiatives, including, of course, the whole gold monetization scheme. You're basically trying to convert people from physical saving in physical assets to basically saving in financial assets. I think on overall basis, I clearly believe this budget is somewhere about trying to increase growth, get ease of doing business, and then propagating and promoting investment. So I think overall, keeping in mind the backdrop of expectations, I think this is a budget which I would basically rate it 10 on 10.
10 on 10, wow. Bobby, let me ask you, and Madan as well, your rating, would it be as high as that?
Well, I don't rate anything 10 on 10, so I'll put it a couple of notches below. But I'd say I'm highly satisfied. I'm very satisfied with what's come in. I think at least from a tax perspective, I'd say it reasonably addresses a number of the expectations that people had. There could have been more said on what's going to happen from a dispute resolution perspective, but he did refer to the fact that they were looking at non-adversarial. He reiterated it, so there is some reassurance that we can draw from that. And on the whole, I think that it works well.
Okay, Madan didn't ask you for your rating. What would that be?
You're coming from a rating agency, you're asking for a rating. So I would actually say it's somewhere between 7 and 8 out of 10, and the reason being that we still don't know about the subsidy part. I think that didn't come in the speech. He spoke about leakages and subsidies.
We have the subsidies.